I made my 6 addicted wife disabled. My wife liked to F7 8 times a day. It got to a point where the only time I could feel my PP was if my wife death gripped it with her callous gym hands. My wife would literally interrupt family functions to go into the bathroom just to give me neck. It sounds great, but it was a pain in the butt to live with. It also didn't help that this woman never crossed the finish line, and I would have to hear about how bad I was in bed every day. I sat her down one day and had a conversation about her high 6 drive. She point blank told me if I could make her cross the finish line, she wouldn't want to have 6 so much. Those words hurt. My PP is already 3.5 inches, and considering my previous only experience with 6 before my wife was my uncle roping me, it was a sensitive topic for me. Her bringing this up really hurt. Oh yeah, you want to finish, I'll finish you off. And with that, I grabbed a pole and absolutely laid the smackdown on, just kidding. I bought a toy for her. I specifically chose the flamingo for her. A remote-controlled toy from Lover's Pulse. She wanted to finish, and she was going to get it day and night, in public and in front of her parents. When it arrived, I showed her my purchase and told her my plans. She seemed excited. We went to a park, and the toy made her spray and knees jiggle like jelly. The same day, we went to a restaurant and got kicked out because she was too loud. I'm overstimulated, she begged by her 7th finish of the day, which took place at a Wendy's. I told her this is how I felt. This is how my PP felt. It felt like my manhood was being tortured by the FBI. Now it was time for her to feel the same. This routine continued for a few weeks, and every day I made her wear this damn toy, and every day I made sure she crossed the finish line at least 6 times a day. About halfway through the 4th week, she got out of bed. Well, she limped out of bed. "I can't walk," she exclaimed to me. She tried walking straight, but to no avail. I disregarded it and made her wear it again for the day. By the end of the day, she wasn't just limping. She had been stimulated so much in these past 4 weeks that by the end of the day, she couldn't talk straight, and her legs shook involuntarily. She actually tripped trying to walk up the stairs. She told me she was sorry by the end of the day. She told me she could not handle this much stimulation and apologized to me for putting me through this for as long as she did. It's been about 3 days since then, and she still walks around with a limp. She has been getting progressively more aggressive in these 3 days and is threatening me with separation if she is injured. We're planning on visiting the hospital tomorrow. I'll update after we return from the hospital. I made my 6 addicted wife disabled. I had made my wife cross the finish line so much and so hard that she walked around with a limp for 4 days straight. We went to the hospital to check if there was anything wrong with her. We laid the story flat out to the doctor, and the doctor looked at me in a way where I could tell he wanted to dap me up. Either way, it turned out that my wife had pulled a muscle in her groin. We thought about it, and it made sense. As one of the last times I used the flamingo toy on her, she ended up falling off the bed and doing the splits. The next day, she woke up with a limp. We got home and she was mad at me. She told me I took it too far and cursed my stupid toy. I told her that what I did was merely reciprocating what she did to me. She got so mad at me, she ended up smashing the flamingo toy with a hammer in front of me, all while limping, of course. "F this stupid thing. Lover's Pulse. I hate you," she cursed the company name. I reminded her that she clearly forgot how good she felt using this toy, how the first time I used it her whole body literally shook and her dress was soaked. "Don't effing remind me," she yelled. I decided to add fuel to the flame and asked her if she was on her period, and she snapped. She actually threw the effing hammer at my head, which I managed to duck. Then she attacked me physically. I've never seen her in such a psychotic rage before. Watching her attack me was quite funny, as watching someone try lunge at you with a limp is humorous. I let out a laugh, and this ticked her off to the point of threatening to bite my pee-pee off in my sleep. Oh, no. I was done. I called the cops, who arrived before she could inflict any more damage to me or the house. The cops were bewildered at the fact this all took place over a 6 toy. My wife left to go stay with her sister. She couldn't go to her parents as they don't speak to her anymore after I made her cross the finish line in front of them during dinner 2 weeks ago. I chose not to press charges, however, as she is still my wife, and I'm still convinced it's just her period. I made my intimacy-addicted wife disabled. It's been a bit of time since my wife threw a hammer at my head and threatened to bite my pee-pee off. Since then, a lot has happened, but we have reconciled. After a few days of her staying with her sister, I realized how much I missed her, and I showed up at her sister's house. I told her I needed to talk to my wife, and she kindly let me in. She was bewildered when she saw me, but I sat down beside her to have a conversation. It was a long talk, and I apologized for overstimulating her enough for weeks on end to give her a limp. She actually still had a small limp and soreness in her groin when I visited. I told her maybe using the flamingo wasn't such a good idea. After the entire conversation, she seemed understanding and said she needed time to think about potentially forgiving me. Well, I waited about a week for a response. During said time, I sent her sweet messages reaffirming everything I told her. Eventually, she agreed to forgive me. We met up again and had a civil talk, and she told me she had two main conditions. The first was that we rebuy the exact same toy, the flamingo from Lover's Pulse, and the third was that we introduce a third party into the bedroom every now and then. I knew my wife was bi, but this was a shock to me, as she was always very against poly. She stated she doesn't want to be poly, but rather after staying in her sister's for so long, she explored her fantasies and realized that she wants other people to be involved in the bedroom. I'm bi too, so I asked her if she wanted strictly girls or guys or a combination of both. She told me a combination of both. I agreed to these conditions and bought the toy. She moved back in the next day, and once the toy arrived, we got back to business. This time only engaging in intimacy about once a day, and using the toy to its full capability to tease her with throughout the day, but not make her cross the finish line. It took us about a month to introduce a third party to the bedroom. Our first was a girl, and we used said toy on this girl. What my wife and I did caused this girl to be speaking Spanish, by the way, and she has become quite a regular in our bedroom life, sleeping with us once every few weeks. We have found more people to engage with and even had a four-way once. This whole experience has made my wife and I's relationship stronger, and I'm glad we could forgive each other. Edith, never mind, we're getting divorced. She gave me gonorrhea. I found my sister's stalker. Sometimes violence is a solution after all. My sister Cindy and I have a very close relationship. She dated Chester during high school. The two also went to the prom. Cindy and I are twins, you have to know. During my freshman year of college, I had a friend with a strange story to tell. She had gone out on a date with a boy. He had lent her his jacket. That's why she went to his room a few days later. When she arrived at his dorm room, it was filled with pictures of a girl he had been to the prom with back in high school. She might not have been his girlfriend, but he had a grand total of 8 pictures of her from the prom, 6 on his dresser, and a few more scattered around. She was shocked to see all these pictures and how obsessed he was with her. He seemed to be trying to justify putting up all the pictures, but everything he said made no sense. To her, it was a little jarring to walk in and not only see these pictures but be expected to pretend she was okay with it. Even though she and the other girl didn't know each other, it was evident that this guy was still hung up on this girl from high school. Needless to say, she didn't date him after that. 2 days later, she pointed to a guy and said, "That was the guy who had all the pictures in the room." I recognized Chester immediately. I asked her if she could tell me where his room was. What she did. My sister had told me that she felt like she was being watched all the time during summer break. Things also got lost in her room, and at one point, it even seemed that someone had been lying in her bed, even though she hadn't been home all day. She was sure she had a stalker, mainly because she got strange messages on social media and photos that the person took of her from bushes or dark corners. I went to Chester's dorm after class and knocked on his door. He opened it, recognized me, and tried to slam the door, but I pushed myself into the room and saw what my friend had described. That's when I realized that the stalker had to be Chester. I'm not proud of it, but I punched him in the face. While he was lying on the floor, I tore off all the pictures and found that there were also newer ones that he had stolen from Instagram. I told him that I would shred him if he thought about my sister for a single time. After that, the news stopped, and it took a little while for Cindy to feel safe again, but I was glad to have found the solution to the problem. After that, the news stopped, and it took a little while for Cindy to feel safe again, but I was glad to have found the solution to the problem. I cheated on my wife with her sister. I know the title sounds bad, but I need to get this off my chest. Me and my wife were childhood sweethearts. We did everything together, and she was the love of my life. I proposed to her when I was 20. I thought it was the right time, so did she. When I was 26, and she was 25, we had our daughter. We were so happy. She was the one thing our life was missing. We were such a happy family. Then a few months after the birth of our first child, she was pregnant again. We were so happy. Now we had our little family of 4. Before anyone asks why we had kids so young, after high school I got my degree in accounting. Then I went to work for my dad. My dad's company is big. I was able to make a lot of money. And yes, when we got married, we agreed to sign a premarital agreement. We went on dates very often, and our bedroom life was amazing. I showered her and our kids with gifts and flowers 3 times a week. We had a big house. I was able to hear her dream life. We would always talk about a lot when we were teens. I thought we were happy. Yet she still cheated on me. I found out she had a hookup app. When I confronted her about it, she didn't deny it. She said I was always absent, and she didn't have a way to be fulfilled. I wanted to leave, but didn't for my kids, even though my pain was too much to even look at her. We went to counseling and we did okay for a while, but one day, maybe 2 months later, she said she was hooking up with guys every night. She even had a few guys over at the house, and in our bed, in the house I paid for. My kids were now at this point 8 and 7. We knew divorce would be hard on them since they loved us both so much. I didn't want them to have a tainted image of her. Through my grief and pain I stayed, but I moved her into the guest bedroom. You're probably wondering where her sister comes in. Well, throughout all this, she was my rock. My family wouldn't have understood my pain. My wife's family always favored her because her sister was the mistake baby. I still loved her, but I didn't know she made her sister's life hell. My wife was barely home when she moved into the guest bedroom. Now our kids barely saw their mom. Whenever they spoke to her, she was either rude, cold, or ignored them. When she came home, she would get something to eat, drink, and go to her room and stay there. So my sister's wife was there for our kids. I shaved my butt and joined my friend group's best butt competition while being a guy. So first of all, I'm a 19-year-old guy, and everyone involved in the butt competition was between the ages of 18 and 20. It all started around a week ago when some girls in my friend group came together and started drinking. They began boasting about their butts, and the next thing you know, they wanted to do a best butt competition. I wasn't there, so I don't know the details, but we were sent a message in a group chat. The rules were simple. If you wanted to join, you just had to send a pic of your butt to a certain girl who would present them anonymously to 8 guys, and they would all vote for the picture of the best butt. Well, I thought it would be funny to join, but I knew that they wouldn't take it seriously because my butt is naturally extremely hairy. So I did the most logical thing at the time. I shaved it. I took the shaving equipment I normally use for my face, switched the blades, and went ham. This is where the first problem came in. The stupid person I am, I didn't lock the door. My mom walked in on me shaving my butt. She just awkwardly wiggled away and I turned extremely red. She didn't say anything, so I thought she would just ignore it. Well, she didn't. She started Googling. That evening she asked me to come to the dinner table to talk. My father ran away, so I knew it would be bad, but I didn't expect it to be that bad. She wanted to talk about intercourse safety in a homosexual relationship. Keep in mind, I'm not actually gay. She was extremely well prepared. Highlights of that evening were practicing with protection and a cucumber, the dangers of gay intimacy without lube, and a brief summary of objects I should definitely not put up my you-know-what, such as lamps and beer bottles. She would not listen to any of my denials and would just say, "It's okay, you're dad and I still love you." I thought the worst was over, so I sent a picture of my shaven butt to the girl that was collecting them. And 2 days later, the 9 pictures of all the contestants were sent, all without any distinguishable features, to the 8 boys. So one thing you should know is that I do have quite a good butt. I got pretty good genes in that aspect, and I've been skating since I was 14. I now skate around 60 kilometers a week, and skating is an incredible way to get a firm, round butt of decent size. You can probably see where this is going. I won with a total of 5 out of 8 votes. One picture got 2 votes, and one got 1 vote. The fallout from this was not that big. Some of the more prideful girls wanted to start some drama, but they didn't want to admit their butt loss to a boy. I didn't talk a lot with them anyway, so that was simply ignored by most of us. Our mixed-gendered trip to a lake when lockdown would end did turn into a guys-only trip, as some of the girls suddenly didn't really feel like going, and the rest didn't want to go to a lake with such a one-sided girl-boy ratio. I do want to say that most of the girls did think it was hilarious on some sort of level, and the ones that didn't are famous in our group for being extremely prideful. It is, however, extremely awkward to talk with most of them, as they now look at my butt quite frequently. It doesn't stop with this, by the way. I was gaming with my friends today, and we started talking about the butt competition. We kept it anonymous as to which butt was from what person, and the people that voted didn't know who won yet, and I did not know who the guys that voted were. Well, the guy I was gaming with happened to be one of the people voting. He said he couldn't choose between 2, so he started pleasuring himself and voted for the one he finished to. I said something along the lines of, "That's gross as F." He then said something like, "You would understand if you saw the butt?" I didn't tell him, but I now have to live with the knowledge that a good friend of mine finished to the picture of my shaven butt. When was the moment you realized you no longer wanted to be married to your spouse? My husband had disappeared overnight. He had left me with a house full of our small children and said he had to fly to another country in order to do some business there. My youngest were twins, 1-year-old, and the oldest child at home was not more than 10, 11 years old. Days went by without me hearing from him. I called the number he had given me before he left the house, and there was never any answer. I was sure something catastrophic had happened to him, but lo and behold, after about 2 weeks, he called that he was fine and just needed to be there longer than expected. I broke down and cried, said all the usual things like, "How could you do this to me? Why didn't you tell me? How will I manage financially?" etc., etc. He had no answers. Strange people started knocking on my door. It turned out that he had borrowed money from all of them, left them checks which had subsequently all bounced. Some of the people understood my predicament and left me alone. Others were not so patient and made threats against me and my children. I scrambled around, looking for work. I found a job editing a newspaper and slowly started paying back his debts plus supporting my family. From time to time, an envelope would arrive with some money, so I knew he hadn't abandoned us completely. Months went by. He would call sometimes, and would be very vague as to when he was coming back. All this time I saw something change in me, in my children, in the atmosphere of our life. The children were better behaved. There was more happiness in the house. I wasn't as dense. Checks weren't bouncing anymore. I realized I wasn't even waiting for him to come back, because my life was turning into something so much better. Are you reading this and thinking, "Hey, you must have been ecstatic"? So here is my answer. No, I was very, very sad. This was the point where I realized I was better off without him. And this realization made me feel like I was saying goodbye to something and someone that I had imagined would always be a constant in my life. Had he not traveled and left us alone, he was gone for almost a year. Perhaps I would never have thought about leaving him. When he came back, he thought things would just go back in time to what was before he left, but I had changed. My life had changed. Even my appearance was different. He had left a cautious, dependent upon him wife, and came back to meet a woman who held down a job, was in charge of an important newspaper, and did not agree with his every word. After many arguments, we finally divorced. I knew I could make it on my own. I'd had extensive training, but it hasn't been easy. Many of my dreams had to make way for keeping a roof over our heads, paying the rent, making sure the children were clothed. I'm not that young innocent anymore, who was so sure that there is always a happy ever after. I am happier, but still feel that I haven't tapped all of life's resources. She cheated on me, so I had a trio with her former ex-boyfriend and the guy she cheated on me with. To clear up any confusion that might come up, you have to know that I am a bisexual man. I love sharing this story because I'm still proud of it. A few years ago, my ex-girlfriend cheated on me with another guy. She then had the audacity to tell me that if I was a grown-up, that I could deal with it, and that she hopes we can still be friends, but she lost any feelings for me and is fully in love with this new guy now. If she hadn't said that, I probably wouldn't have made this plan. But now I had to teach her a valuable lesson. I was in a depressed state for a long time and couldn't bring myself to delete her number, and she thought I was her friend now. She started to send me pictures of her and her new boyfriend with laughing emojis. She didn't even care about how much she had hurt me. And then one day while I went through Tinder, I found someone who was quite familiar. Her new boyfriend. Of course I wouldn't tell her that her new boyfriend is on Tinder. In fact, I matched with him, which was quite surprising, because I thought he was straight, and we started a conversation. He didn't know who I was. She never told him she was in a relationship while she was flirting with him, but this was perfect. We had longer conversations, and he told me more and more about him. Over the weeks we learned more and more about each other, and now I had a plan. I suggested that we could meet each other at a bar. He agreed. Keep in mind he was still in a relationship with my ex-girlfriend at that time. When we met, we had a great time, and one date became many dates. It took me few months, but then I got him to the point where he developed feelings for me, and I was his affair. What he didn't know is that I got in contact with my girlfriend's former ex-boyfriend as well. He broke up with her because he came out as gay. I was in contact with both guys. The ex-boyfriend and I got along very well. In fact, I made him a close friend of mine. In our conversations with my new boyfriend, we talked about sensual desires, and he told that he always wanted to have a trio, so I suggested one with the gay ex-boyfriend. I knew that he was his type, because we kind of look alike, and he had feelings for me, so I asked the gay ex-boyfriend if he wanted to become the third one, and to my surprise, he said yes. I'm honestly still surprised how all of that worked out without her noticing, but it did. And then the day came where I decided to go nuclear. The two guys came to my apartment, and I lead them to the bedroom, and they started talking to each other. While they talked, I took a selfie from a safe distance, close enough so that she could see their faces but far enough that they wouldn't notice. Then the action started. Of course, I won't go into any detail, but damn, I enjoyed it more than anything in the world. A few days after this, I told him that now that I granted him the wish of a trio, I wanted something in return. I told him that I don't want to be an affair any longer, and told him that he should either break up with her or I will break up with him. I knew it was hardcore manipulative, but I had a plan, and I had full control over him. He actually broke up with her and threw her out. I even got him to move out of his apartment to move in with me, meaning that she lost both her home and her boyfriend. But I wasn't done yet, because after that she texted me with crying emojis that her boyfriend dumped her and that she regrets leaving me. I then said, "Your boyfriend? Are you talking about this guy?" And I sent her the selfie I took. She called and texted me several times, but I ignored her. My plan was almost successful. There were only 3 things left that I still had to do. The first was that I told her mother, who hates infidelity more than anything because her father cheated on her mother with another woman. Her mother was angry, but thanked me for telling her. From what I've heard, is that her mother cut ties with her. But I admit that I don't know if that actually happened, and I don't think that it happened, but it would be funny if it was true. The second thing I did was dumping him, because unfortunately for him, he was a cheater too, and I hate infidelity. The last thing I did was going out with the gay ex-boyfriend, and after a few dates we got together, and we are still a couple. In the end, I destroyed both her and the guy she cheated on me with and couldn't be more proud of myself. He wanted to fake his death. Too bad he was exposed beforehand. I had one of those so-called friends that seemed more like an acquaintance. His name was Ezra. Ezra always had great stories to tell. He once said he played golf with the president when he was a caddy at a club. He couldn't say which president it was and which golf club, but the girls liked the story. Another time he said he found $5,000. When he handed these to the lost and found, it turned out the money belonged to a Jewish businessman. Out of gratitude, the latter gave him half of the money. But the biggest story was when he claimed to have cancer. He was spreading the news far and wide on Facebook, claiming that he was struggling with lung cancer and fighting for his life. Initially, I thought it was true and felt terrible for him. I never thought he would lie about something so serious. Everyone around him was rallying to his side, sympathizing with him, and trying to do whatever they could to help him through this difficult time. Ezra was unemployed, barely surviving on jobs. Cancer like that is costly, and we were all worried about what would become of him because, of course, he had no money. So we decided to help him. Ezra was very active in the church, and there was a raffle planned. We collected all kinds of things that we could donate. In return, we set up a small fund and hoped that a few people would give us some money. At the same time, we set up a GoFundMe and did not distribute flyers with the link. Ezra was moved to tears. He didn't show up at the event. He said he was ill because of the chemo, but he kept his fingers crossed that a lot of money came around. Raffle day. We all stood at our little booth and told whoever would listen, or not, what was going on with Ezra. Then, an elderly gentleman came to us and listened to the story of Ezra. He started laughing and shook his head. He said he thought it was nice that we raised money so Ezra could pay off his debt. We weren't sure what he was talking about. Then the man told me that Ezra had lost a horrible sum playing poker at the casino 2 towns away a few weeks ago, and that he was running out of time to raise the money. We were all more than surprised and went to Ezra in the evening. He sat on the couch as if nothing had happened. The flourishing life, so to speak. That's when we realized that he had lied to us. One of the guys took him through the mangle and squeezed out of him what was really going on. Ezra had planned to fake his death, so he posted the story on Facebook. However, he realized it was a better solution when we told him we were raising money for him. With that, we all left his house and gave the money we had collected to a gambling addicts association in Ezra's name. All his friends turned their backs on him and posted on social media that it was a lie. No matter what Ezra said about his cancer, nobody knows what happened to Ezra after that. When did you realize your open marriage was a terrible idea? A week ago, I discovered my husband was on a dating app. He was showering, and I had picked up his phone to order our taxi as the app was not working on my phone. The Tinder app icon covered my face on a screensaver photo of us. We were both 33 and been married for 2 years. I clicked on the icon and went through his profile. In his bio, he described himself as a single man looking for subtle fun. He listed his interests as music, movies, sports, reading, and going to the gym. This almost made me laugh. This man had not been to a gym in his life but was one of those lucky individuals who seemed to be in naturally good shape despite eating an ungodly amount of trash. He also wouldn't be able to tell anybody where the nearest bookshop was. All his photos were from our holiday in Europe. He had cropped me out of every single one. He had several active chats with different women. I heard the water turn off in the shower and threw his phone back onto the pillow on his side of the bed. I told him I no longer felt like going out to dinner, and he started yelling about how I always changed my mind about everything. I curled up into a ball and told him to leave me alone. Then I started sobbing and he let the towel fall from around his waist. He got dressed in the jeans and shirt I had picked out for him. He stormed out of the house. I tortured myself imagining himself going to meet another woman from the app where we had originally met. I called my sister, my mother, and many of my friends. They all instructed me to leave him, and I insisted I could not. I simply loved the man too much. I wanted us to be one of those couples who grew old together and spent their twilight years knowing that they lived a life filled with love. I told myself that I would continue to let him use the app and have his flings as long as he always returned to me. I did not even plan to let him know that I knew. I did want to put him under more stress or inflict more guilt than he probably already felt. That's how much I loved him. My husband got home around 3 a.m. I could only smell beer and sweat on him. No perfume. He apologized for losing his cool, and I said I regretted not going to dinner. We had 6, and he fell asleep shortly afterwards. I slid his phone from under the pillow. My husband also did not know that I knew he used my birthday as the passcode on his phone. I used this fact to remind myself that he really did love me, and then went back onto his Tinder. I took photographs with my own phone, his profile, his Tinder premium membership which gave him unlimited swipes, his matches, the messages they exchanged, the profiles of his matches. I slid the phone back under his pillow. Like I said, I did not mind my husband having his fun, but I wanted to know all about it. I parked outside the supermarket and looked through the window. I saw her at register number 7. The woman my husband had been seeing the most. The woman he saw on the night I discovered his presence on the app. She had served me many times while I bought food for me and my husband. Her eyes locked onto me as I walked through the door. I picked up a basket and shopped like there was nothing wrong. I picked out all his favorite foods and wondered if she would recognize them. Their messages indicated they genuinely liked each other. They were more than just six, but less than a romantic threat. They were friends with benefits. He had reiterated early in their exchanges that he had no plans to leave me, which made me very happy but did not dampen my curiosity about the girls he visited. I lined up at her register, although the case were shorter at others. She was somehow prettier in person. She was only 19. She had all the beauty and glow of youth. She told me she was sorry, and I saw a tear roll down her cheek. I noticed my hands had been shaking as I lifted the items out of the basket and placed them on the conveyor belt. She obviously sensed my knowledge of truth. I handed her a tissue from my purse and told her to pull herself together. I asked her what time she clocked off, and after she answered, I said I would pick her up. When did you realize your open marriage was a terrible idea? Part 2. I warned her not to speak to my husband before our meeting. At 7 o'clock I collected the woman. She shivered as I drove, and I put on the heating. I got us both milkshakes at the McDonald's driveway and parked at the entrance to the forest on the outside of the town. By now her hands were shaking, but I told her to relax. I promised I was not going to hurt her. I said I just wanted somewhere quiet where me and her could talk. She started rambling and I could not understand her. I insisted she calm down, have some of her strawberry shake and speak slower. She detailed how he said we had an open marriage. He had claimed I was also on the app and regularly seeing other men. She informed me that he met several women around town. I wondered how many people in my hometown thought I slept around and was in an open marriage. Although such spousal behavior may have enraged many people, my main priority was still retaining my husband and keeping my marriage intact. I explained to her that I did not want him to know that I knew. I told her that I did not mind her sleeping with my husband as long as she would never try to take him away from me. The teenager then started sobbing about how she could never possibly continue seeing him after this supposedly horrendous experience. I lifted my purse from between my purse, pulled out a fistful of notes, and dropped them onto her lap. I asked her if this brought back his appeal. The sobbing girl counted the notes and wiped at her ease, which dreed remarkably quickly. She nodded quickly and pocketed the cash. I started the car and drove her home. I realized I was paying this woman to continue sleeping with my husband, and I laughed. That night, as I laid beside my husband in bed and smiled at his cute snores, I felt satisfied. Although the cashier was the only one who sensed that I knew, I scouted out all the women my husband was sleeping with. I concluded each of them was worthy of such a magnificent man, but would also not threaten our marriage. After 20 minutes of failing to sleep, I got an idea. Why not make his lies into truths? Why not let him know that I knew about his affairs but did not mind? Then I thought he would not mind if I also had my fun on the side. I also felt certain this would alleviate any guilt he felt about sleeping around. I thought an equal playing field would equal a happy marriage. I downloaded Tinder on my phone and quickly set up a profile. I kept him in my pictures. I was certainly not ashamed of our now open marriage. I copied his interests exactly. I thought that was cute. In my bio, I described myself as a happily married woman who wanted a bit of fun on the side. The matches immediately came flooding in. The back of my phone started feeling overly hot, and I briefly worried it would explode. I started conversing with a man 2 years older than me. That's one way I did differ from my husband. I could never sleep with anybody significantly younger. This man complimented my appearance and made me laugh with cheesy pickup lines. I agreed to meet him that night. I turned to tell my husband I was acceptive of unfaithfulness and was going out to officially make our marriage open, like he had been telling everybody. I felt a tingle of stomach of how happy a reaction he would have. Then I decided to let my beautiful king enjoy his sleep and came up with an even better way of telling him the marvelous news. My Tinder match picked me up in his pickup truck outside our home. The neighbor's bedroom curtains twitched as the match drove off with me in the passenger seat and his hand on me. His house was on the other side of town, and our hands got very adventurous on the way over, while Taylor Swift played on the radio. I had never been happier in my entire life, and I felt my marriage had never been in a better place. We were both getting the thrill of new flames, but also got to retain the love from our marriage. The man had a nice house on the other side of town. He poured 2 glasses of expensive wine and took me upstairs. We had a long, deeply satisfying time together. When he had finally finished, I asked for a selfie. I wanted a photograph to accompany the text informing my husband of the wonderfully legitimate openness of our marriage. The man smiled and stuck up his thumb. I tiled my head slightly sideways and stuck out my tongue. Immediately after I sent the text, my husband called me. I answered the phone with the biggest smile on my face and immediately burst into tears when he said the word divorce. I'm afraid to sleep with my nephew again. I, 15, have 5 nephews, 13, 10, 9, 6, and 3, from my older sister, 37. We have an age gap of 22 years because my mom and dad were in their late 40s when they had me. I wasn't planned. Now, onto the story. I'm currently on vacation with my sister, her husband, and my nephews in a camping. I sleep in a tent with my 3 older nephews. On the left sleeps my 9-year-old nephew. Then there is me, the 13-year-old, and the 10-year-old. This story is about the 13-year-old one, who we'll call Ray. Ray is a few inches taller than me. He's strong and has some anger issues, but he never hit me or anything because we're almost the same age, so we get along pretty well. The first 2 nights everything went fine, but the 3rd night I woke up feeling like something was touching my arm. I turned around, and it was Ray. I asked what's wrong, but he quickly removed his hand and closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. I was confused, but I brushed it was Ray. I asked, what's wrong? But he quickly removed his hand and closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. I was confused, but I brushed it off, thinking I imagined it. I was wrong. The next night it happened again and more than once. I would feel someone touching my arm, my leg, even my chest. I wear undershirt as pajamas because I got a little sunburned on my back. Every time I got more and more scared that he would hurt me, so I made sure to move or tell him what's wrong, in order to make him stop. Each time he pretended to be asleep, but I catched him looking at me to see if I was awake. I tried to cover myself with blankets so that he couldn't touch my legs or my chest anymore, but he touches my arm or my hand instead. Yesterday night was the 5th night here at the camping, and it was the worst night of my life. I was wearing a hoodie, 2 blankets, and I made sure to be as far as I could to him, right next to my 9-year-old nephew, and to face him, so I could say what he was doing. When I fell asleep, everything was normal. Then I woke up to something touching my chest. I forgot to zip on my hoodie. I moved, and so did he. I zip up my hoodie and covered myself with the blankets. My heart was racing, my nerves were tense, and I was scared. He tried to touch my hand, but again I moved. Things got quiet for a bit, but then I noticed that his blanket was moving. He was touching himself. I was disgusted and horrified at the thought that he was thinking of me. I froze and stayed still until he got up and went to the bathroom. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. It was 3:20 a.m., so I figured I woke up around 3 a.m. I held my phone in case I needed to call help. I heard his steps outside the tent, so I pretended to be asleep. He tried to touch my hand again, but eventually went back to sleep. I was too scared to close my eyes, but around 4 a.m. I went back to sleep. At 8:10 a.m. I woke up. I was hot, so I took off my blanket and put them between me and Ray. He was apparently awake, 'cause he touched my leg. That wasn't covered by the blanket anymore. I had enough. I moved. He pretended to be asleep, so I grabbed my phone and my bag and went to my sister's house, because I was tired to be scared. Now we're at the beach playing Uno all together, but I can't not think about this. Tonight I plan to ask my 9-year-old nephew to sleep with me with the excuse of the cold, so there is someone between us. If he does that again, I plan to confront him and tell my sister. Because this isn't a normal behavior. I don't want to tell my sister yet, maybe because a part of me hopes that it's all a misunderstanding and that he'll stop. I don't really know why I'm so scared. I just needed to tell someone this. I cheated on my wife with her sister. She would be at the house a lot. She picked up my kids and did things with them. She was also home when my wife was home, but didn't care. After 2 years of this, my kids started to call her Mom. She didn't want them to if they didn't want to, but they wanted to, which made me happy. They had only spoken a handful of times to their mom. By now they were used to it, and so was I. Me and my wife's sisters would spend a lot of time together, and I loved it. So did she. Now this leads me to the current situation, so I had booked a trip to Fiji, for me, my wife, and kids. My wife's sister wanted us to try and fix things, which I tried to do for the first year, but I stopped trying since she wasn't. So I went to my wife and told her about it. She just yelled at me and told me to F off and that she wasn't coming, and I kid you not, referred to her own kids as those little shats. This sounds like she knew about our kids calling their auntie Mom. If she did know, she would have thrown a fit. She said they weren't hers anymore, and it was a mistake to even have them. This threw me off, but I did not persist, so I asked my wife's sister and told her what happened. She said yes, and we arrived last week. It's been amazing. Me, my wife's sister, and my kids have had a blast. They love her, and this makes me so happy knowing they have a mother figure throughout all the drama of the past 3 years. So this leads me to last tonight. My kids met another family with kids, so they spent the night, which left me and my wife's sister alone. We talked about the kids and life in general with a mood and atmosphere. We could both tell something was going on between us, and I kissed her. She stopped me, asking if I really want to do this and that this doesn't seem right. I told her I did, and I feel like we could both feel it. We didn't share a room. My kids shared a bed and I had one next to them. My wife's sister had the master bedroom, so we ended up sleeping together. Yes, I know it's bad, but nothing had happened like this before. The setting really set us up, so right now I'm lying in bed next to her typing this out. About to text my lawyer. She's still sleeping. I just needed to get this out. Really set us up. So right now I'm lying in bed next to her typing this out, about to text my lawyer. She's still sleeping. I just needed to get this out. My late wife left our sons a substantial sum of money. My wife thinks she has a right to it. My wife Anna died 10 years ago. We have 2 children together, John, M, 18, and Freddie, M, 16. She died of breast cancer when the boys were very young. Anna had a very good job dealing with the stock market and had started investing early for the boys to ensure they were taken care of when they went to college. I have always worked from home and looked after the boys. Anna had also ensured I was cared for if she were to die. To this day, I am grateful to her for that. Anna's will states that the boys only have access to the money when they are 18. As John had recently celebrated his 18th birthday, I took him to Anna's lawyer, who explained the legal steps to ensure that John had access to the money. I didn't tell my new wife Suzanne anything about that. Suzanne herself had 2 children who were older than John and Fred. Both go to college and have to work part-time. In a prenup, Suzanne and I agreed that everyone would pay for their own children's college. John has now been accepted into a prestigious university and will move out soon. He had enough money to pay for college. He had also decided to buy an apartment so that, for once, he would not have to live in the dorm and would have an investment for later when he finished his studies. I thought the idea was excellent, and John and I discussed it at the dinner table. Then, of course, Suzanne had overheard our conversation and was shocked. I briefly explained to her what the situation was. Then she freaked out. How can it be that my children are given preferential treatment? If there was so much money in the family, the boys and I could help out with her children, who had to work full-time jobs to pay for college. I made it clear that we had clarified in our prenup that everyone pays for their own children as far as college is concerned. That being said, the money isn't mine. It's Anna, who saved it for the boys. Thus, no one except Anna's sons were entitled to the money. Then Suzanne got really angry. She said that in a family, everyone supports everyone, and my boys have an obligation to support their siblings. I must mention that Suzanne's children are spoiled brats. My boys had never really been treated well, so I had often considered separating from Suzanne since she tolerated this behavior toward my children. I let Suzanne know that my boys didn't have to support well, so I had often considered separating from Suzanne since she tolerated this behavior toward my children. I let Suzanne know that my boys didn't have to support anything or anyone if they didn't want to, and that if her children had just been a little kinder to the two of them, they would undoubtedly have had a good relationship. Then Suzanne started threatening divorce if I didn't ensure her children got some of the money. At that moment I realized what a greedy dragon she was. It was like a veil had been lifted from my eyes. I told her I preferred the divorce and asked her to leave my house. That shocked her, but I didn't care. John and Fred approached me afterward and thanked me for standing up for them. That same evening, Susanna went to her mother, who agreed with me about everything. My partner asked me for an open relationship, so I slept with his brother. My boyfriend and I are both 26 years old, and we've been together for about 2 years. We've never had any issues up until last month when he asked to open our relationship. He said that all men have the innate desire to sleep with as many women as they'd like. He said that women are attracted to men like him who are in their peak physical shape, and that he should take advantage of that, proceeding to say something about men wanting to spread their seed far and wide. I didn't see this coming at all, and I was appalled. By the time he was finished, he told me that I'm perfect wife material and the woman he wants to come home to, but that only rubbed salt on the wound. However, I told him that this was fine with me and asked if he had anyone in particular in mind that had made him come to this decision. He was surprised by my reaction and told me how awesome I was for being so understanding. He then showed me his Tinder profile on an upcoming date. He knew that this arrangement only benefited him because I'm not into casual flings and wouldn't feel comfortable sleeping around. He said he knows that I wouldn't go looking for other guys because I'm too sweet and loyal. This really set me off. He was already looking for hookups before he even brought up the topic of an open relationship with me, and I knew from his Tinder profile that he would have cheated on me regardless of what my decision on the matter was. So I decided the best way to go about this was to do something that I knew would upset him. He has a 19-year-old brother, and I called him the following day explaining the entire open relationship situation. His brother had proposed and asked if he'd be interested in having some fun with me. He admitted that he was willing, but felt a bit insecure because he was a virgin at the time. But I told him it was all right because he wouldn't be after the night was over. I kept my word and we slept together later that night. Afterwards, I asked my boyfriend about his date, and he said he had a great time. I told him that I met a guy who was younger than him who was a pretty cute, shy, and inexperienced rugby player. He was curious enough to ask for a picture, which I gladly sent him. And when he saw the guy I was talking about was his brother, all hell broke loose. He had a complete meltdown and called me all sorts of slurs and profanities under the sun. I told him it's only natural for me to want someone like his younger brother, and reminded him about our conversation, where he talked about how women wanted men in peak physical form, which his brother clearly was. He is still blowing up my phone even after I left his house, and has sent me dozens of texts since I told him that our relationship was over. But he kept saying that he forgives me, even though I'm deeply effed up and arranged. He suggested therapy, but claimed it might not help someone as evil as me. I believe what I did was justified after everything he had said and done, but maybe I went too far. Am I a hole? My sister wants to sleep with my husband. What comes out is so much worse. He told me that my sister had been trying to get him to sleep with her for many years. However, he had repeatedly refused and even had to physically defend himself against her, especially when I was pregnant. She had been very aggressive and nearly stalked him to get his attention and convince him to have intimacy with her. He described various events to me, such as barbecue parties at my parents' house, where she tried to urinate in the pantry, or the time we took her to the swimming pool. My sister has always had trouble attracting men, even though she's actually pretty and has a good job. I was just speechless. My husband then told me that he was now worried that she would run around telling lies because not only had he rejected her, but I knew about it. He had heard that she had already threatened one of his friends to report him for abuse. That was also the reason why nobody in our circle wanted to have anything to do with her. I assured him that if she tried anything, I would have his back. The first calls came the very next day. Our parents called and asked if I was okay, because they had heard from my sister that my husband cheated on me with her. I assured him that if she tried anything, I would have his back. The first calls came the very next day. Our parents called and asked if I was okay, because they had heard from my sister that my husband cheated on me with her. I told them what really happened, which first surprised then angered them. I had the same conversation with one or the other of our friends and acquaintances. I was touched that everyone wanted to help me in such a case, assuming I'd left behind as a single mom, but that was obviously not necessary. I finally wrote my sister a text to stay away from our friends, and if she kept telling lies like that, I would try to sue her for character defamation. So far, she has not replied to my messages. I'm really more than fed up with this woman. What would you do in this case? My sister wants to sleep with my husband. What comes out is so much worse. My husband, M, 39, and I, F, 32, had our first baby a little more than a year ago. My husband is working remotely and earns enough money for me to be able to extend my maternity leave. He also suggested that I could stay home as a SOM, as we do not rely on both of us having an income. I realize that we are in a very privileged position here, something my sister frowned upon. My sister recently came to visit. The three of us were sitting on the couch watching a movie when she suddenly asked what we thought of monogamy. I have no idea how she came up with this topic, but my husband replied that we both chose to be monogamous. However, we respect it when other couples choose a different lifestyle. My sister seemed a bit disappointed, so I asked her what was going on. She said that she had hoped that we would be open to our marriage because she would like to have intimacy with my husband. I was shocked, and my husband grimaced in disgust. We paused the film and looked at her in shock. I couldn't say anything at that moment because my husband got up and told my sister to please leave our house. At that moment, our child started screaming, so I rushed into the children's room. My sister left our house without another word, and my husband stood in the kitchen making himself a drink. I found what she had said more than repulsive. I wondered how she came up with that. After I fed our child, I saw him scowling in the kitchen and asked him what was the matter. I never would have guessed what he said next. What is the worst thing that has happened at a high school reunion party that you attended? At my 10-year high school reunion, we had a decent turnout, maybe 100 plus people. We were at a pretty nice hotel banquet hall. There was one guy I had known all through high school, and he was a well-known stoner. I'll call him Chris for this story. I see Chris walk into the banquet hall, stop in his tracks, turn around in a very slow 360-degree circle, surveying the entire room. He just says, "Whoa," and he looks visibly alarmed. He stops and his eyes settle on me. I say, "Hey Chris, long time no see, man." He kind of slides over to me and whispers in my ear, "This is really weird. I'm pretty sure I know every single person in this room." And that is when I realize he is wearing the same clothes as all the banquet hall workers. Oh my God. Chris is working as a server at his own high school reunion, and he has no clue what is happening. I walk him out to the front lobby and explain it's our 10-year high school reunion. He is mortified beyond embarrassed. He was never contacted and didn't even realize it had been 10 years since we graduated. He just knew he was working another catering gig in a never-ending series of catering gigs. I make him take me to his manager. I explain what is happening and tell the manager there is no way this guy is working his own high school reunion. Awesomely, the manager agrees. We find a different suit jacket and tie for him, and I take Chris back to the party. He ended up having a good night. Cousin falsely accused me of SA. Now my family is finally contacting me after almost 10 years. I grew up in what was probably the most normal of normal households. Parents worked a lot, but still managed to care for me and my 3 older sisters. We were never super close as a family, but never had any issues either. Same goes for my extended family. They always lived a few hours away, but we saw each other during summer holidays or Christmas, and always got along great. But when we got older, we naturally grew apart as everyone had their own lives. I'm 31 now. In 2014, when I was 22 and attending uni, I got a phone call from my mother that turned my life upside down. I remember I didn't even answer at first, because I was gaming with friends, but she called again immediately after the first call. This was an unwritten rule in the family. If you call twice like that, it's important. Like someone died important. So when she called again, I excused myself and answered, only to hear chows in the other end. Like people were arguing. But when my mom realized I had answered, it sounded like she went to another room and closed the door. I just asked her what was going on and I heard she was crying. My memory of this conversation is a bit blurry, but she basically asked me if I had something to confess to regarding E. E is my cousin on my mom's side and is 7 years younger than me, 15 at the time. At that point I hadn't even seen E for several years. I just said no and asked what this is about. She just cried even harder and started accusing me of assaying E back when we were children. That E had told everything to my sister, and that my sister told my mother and my aunt. E had told them that back when she was 9 and I 16, she'd been playing in my room when I came in and started feeling her under her clothes and kissing her. My mother screamed at me to say something, but I couldn't even speak. It was all so absurd. I remember thinking that must be some bad joke. The last thing I remember saying was that it's not true and that E is lying. But then my mom goes on saying that how E gave such a detailed description of where and how. Then she kept asking something like, "Did you do this? Did you do this?" And I just screamed back at her, "No." Each time. It all ended with my mom putting me on speaker and both my mom and dad saying that they don't want anything to do with me and never to contact them again. Cousin falsely accused me of SA. Now my family is finally contacting me after almost 10 years. 2 of my sisters texted me later that day, pretty much saying that I'm disgusting and then blocked me. I know it's weird, but after that call, I went to have a long shower. To this day, I still don't know why I did that. After calming down, I started calling and texting everyone, even E. No one answered and the ones who hadn't blocked my number by then quickly did so. The only thing I heard back was from my father who texted me to stop contacting them and that they need to heal. That was 9 years ago, and I haven't spoken to anyone in my family since that day. To say this flicked me up is an understatement. I was living in a haze for weeks after that and hardly ate at all. It didn't help that this was right before I was supposed to defend my bachelor's thesis and was already stressed out. Luckily, my co-writer said, something was up and saved me by controlling the conversation so that I got the easy parts. Without him, I would have failed. Needless to say, no one came to my graduation. Then started the worst period of my life. I spent the first year expecting the cops to knock on my door and arresting me for sexual abuse. I didn't land any jobs, just living off my saved money. I drank a lot and did oxy. I also grew resentful and violent. The only reason I didn't hurt anyone is because no one was around. My neighbor called the cops on me once after I had smashed a glass. But I managed to convince the officers that I had just dropped it, and they went away since there were no others inside my apartment. Instead of sleeping, I spent my nights planning how I could hurt E and make sure no one ever found out. Even thinking how I could actually do the things she'd accuse me of, but much worse. I know, I'm not proud of that. I landed my first real job in my field in late 2015. Only then did things start to improve. I focused all my time on my job, as it gave me something normal to do. Recovery was a slow process, but I drank less and smiled more. I lived cheap and earned good money, so I made a point of buying myself a nice gift for my birthdays, a VR headset, a motorcycle, Lego, etc. And last year I moved from my shabby apartment and bought a small house. I am not going to your braless wedding. I have been breastfed since I turned 9 and am currently AF cup. My sister, 23, has always been small-breasted, a cup, and rarely wears a bra as a result. She's always been jealous, of course. Last week she announced she got engaged, and I am her maid of honor. I was thrilled. Then I got her invitation and was shocked to see she wants the wedding to be child and bra-free. When I asked what that meant, she said she got the idea from child-free weddings that made adults more comfortable, so she thought a bra-free wedding would be even more comfortable. When I calmly pointed out that I would prefer to wear a bra because I didn't want to be bouncing down the aisle, she suggested this would be a good time to consider a breast reduction. She said she actually wanted a maximum cup size of B for everyone at the wedding, male and female. I calmly told her I refused to have a breast reduction just for her wedding, and also accused her of using this as an excuse to make me as small as she is, and she got upset. She insisted this was non-negotiable, and I would be better off without such big melons, so I told her I would not be attending her wedding. After I left, I also called the other women at the bridal party, and they also said they wouldn't be attending because of the bra requirement. Since then, my sister, her friends, and family have been blowing up my phone, saying I sabotaged her wedding intentionally. But I think she's the one who screwed up making it bra-free. Am I in the wrong here, though? I was in a meeting with my sister, and I was talking about the wedding, and I was like, I know I sabotaged her wedding intentionally, but I think she's the one who screwed up making it bra-free. Am I in the wrong here, though? My 13-year-old brother leaves the house every night. When I found out why, I never looked at him the same. Every evening at 6 o'clock straight after dinner, my brother, who was 13, left the house and did not come back until well after midnight. He claimed to just be meeting friends. It was summer, so our parents did not mind. They were just glad that he had finally stopped playing Call of Duty with strangers on the internet and made some real-life friends instead. However, I had my suspicions. My brother had never exactly played well with others. A few years prior, he bit a boy at a birthday party. As his older sister, I felt protective and wanted to make sure he wasn't getting himself into trouble or wrapped up with the wrong crowd. I was only 2 years older than him, but I still felt it was my responsibility to look out for him. One evening, after he left, I asked my parents if they really thought he was just going to meet friends. They looked at each other and shrugged. Our father said we had no reason not to believe him. I said we should worry about what he was doing with these friends, if they even really existed. Our father sipped his tea, and our mother put more bread into the toaster. Our mother then asked if I was jealous about my brother having friends. She claimed I wasn't exactly popular myself. She said I used to spend most of my spare time with my brother before he made his new friends. It was not true that I did not have many friends. I had lots of friends, but it was true that me and my brother spent a lot of time together. I loved him, and he was my friend. To be honest, he was my best friend, but my interest in his new friends was honestly out of concern rather than jealousy. I considered my brother to be a very naive and innocent individual. He still believed wrestling was real, for God's sake. I just had the sinking feeling that somebody was taking advantage of him or making him do really bad stuff. The following morning, I walked into his room as he slept and sat on the edge of his bed. I thought if I ambushed him early, then he might part with the truth a bit more easily. I screamed and my brother sat sharply up as if he had just woken from a nightmare. I laughed, and he called me a beach while rubbing his eyes. I begged him to tell me where he went at night, and he fed me the same old BS friend's excuse. I said I did not believe him, and was just being a good sister by trying to find out the truth. My 13-year-old brother leaves the house every night. When I found out why, I never looked at him the same. He said he did not need my help, protection, or friendship. I stole the pillow from behind his back and started beating him over the head. This was an attempt at harassing him into telling me the truth. This attempt did not work. He fought back with a second pillow and quickly gained the upper hand. I fled from his room, and he slammed the door. He told me to mind my own business from the other side. That evening, I decided to follow my brother. Usually, I am an advocate for respecting someone's privacy, but this was about a family member's safety. As he walked up the driveway, I put on my jumper and pulled up the hood. My parents asked where I was going, and I said I was going to meet some friends. I had to be careful while following my brother. I stayed a safe distance behind and dropped down to tie my shoelaces the one time he looked back. When he walked into a small grocery store, I ducked behind a BMW and peeked over the side to watch him. He waited until the sole cashier turned around, then stuffed his pockets with candy and paste from the store. I expected an alarm to go off but only heard the nearby traffic and concluded my brother must have known the store was too cheap to have a proper security system. This was where I first started thinking my brother might be less innocent and naive than I originally thought. I continued following him until he reached a farm located 5 minutes outside of town. He knocked on the door and I crouched behind the ditch at the top of the thankfully short entrance road. A girl answered the door and pulled him straight into a hug followed by a sloppy kiss on the cheek. This girl was cute, and I was absolutely flabbergasted. I did not think my brother had reached the stage of liking girls. Just the previous week, he had fretted over the existence of cooties and laughed at the idea of hanging out with the girl who lived across the street. As I turned to go home and further contemplate the true reason for my brother's daily outings, the girl led him around the side of the 2-story farmhouse. Curiosity got the better of me and I prayed none of the girl's family were watching from the windows. I peeked around the corner of the house and saw my brother sitting with the girl on a garden bench. They ate the sweets he stole from the grocery store and told each other horrendously unfunny knock-knock jokes. My 13-year-old brother leaves the house every night. When I found out why, I never looked at him the same. Then the girl stood up from the bench and opened the back door of her house, and a dog sprinted around the garden. The dog jumped onto my brother's lap and he pushed him off. My brother never liked dogs. I heard the girl say she had been wanting to get rid of the dog for a long time. She said he belonged to her stepmother. My brother and the girl bent beside the dog and broke off little squares of chocolate from the jumbo-sized bar. They fed the chocolate squares to the dog while shooting each other mischievous smiles. I recalled all the times our parents told us never to feed chocolate to a dog, due its fatal effect. I sprinted away from the house, distraught that my previously sweet brother had turned into an animal-murdering monster. When I got back to our house, my parents immediately noticed my red eyes and asked me what was wrong. I didn't have the heart to tell them what their son had become. I had decided to deal with the problem on my own, but just didn't know how yet. I told them I had gotten into a fight with my friends and wanted to be left alone. I went to my room, got into bed and buried my face in my pillow. I was woken the following morning by my brother knocking on the door. He sat on the edge of my bed and sighed. Our parents had told him I was upset and sent him to comfort me. He asked me what happened and who were these supposed friends that had upset me. I sat up to yell at him and call him a murderer. I was about to call him all the nasty names under the sun, warning him to never go near that girl or her house again. Then I realized that was only going to drive him further into her psychotic grasp. I told my brother to mind his own business and leave me alone. He mumbled something about me getting more dramatic with every passing day and left my room. I came up with a plan to get my brother away from the bad influence farm girl without him ever knowing my input. Some internet research revealed it was only the girl, her father, and her stepmother living at the house. The girl's name was Emmer, and I thought that was an ugly name. An hour later, I was back at the top of the Emer's laneway. I watched the house for 40 minutes, pondering the best way to execute my plan. Then her dad and stepmom got into their car. I pretended to be a stranger out for a stroll and waved as they drove past. My 13-year-old brother leaves the house every night. When I found out why, I never looked at him the same. When their car had turned the corner, I walked up the laneway and knocked on the door. Emer answered the door, and I walked straight past her into the living room. She asked me what the hell I thought I was doing, and I sat down on her couch. She threatened to call the police, and I said I would tell her father and stepmom the truth about the dog, unless she did exactly what I said. I instructed the girl not to speak to my brother or even look in his direction again. I instructed her to block his number and ignore him if he ever approached her when school started back up. The girl nodded meekly and told me she was sorry for everything. She said the dog had bit her, and I said I did not believe her nor care. Back at my home, as I ate dinner with my family, I felt proud of myself. I had successfully looked out for my little brother. Us being able to be friends again was also a nice bonus. I imagined he would be heartbroken over losing the girl, but I knew it was for the best in the long term. Besides, he was 13. It couldn't have been anything more than puppy love. Then, after dinner, much to my confusion, my brother put on his coat and said he was off to meet his friends again. I chased him up the driveway and asked if he had heard from his friends today. My brother turned around and laughed in my face. Some of his spit landed on my nose. My brother said he no longer considered me his sister. He said it would be my word against his and the girls about what happened to the dog. He warned me to never go near her again, or else I'd see a side of him that I would not like. I didn't know what to say. Ever since then, I looked at him with disgust, wondering how he could do the horrid things he was doing. He would leave at 6 o'clock for about the next 2 months almost every night, and my parents never suspected a thing. I decided to leave it alone because I actually feared him. If he had the heartlessness to cow that dog, who knows how dangerous he really could be. As soon as I left for college, I made a vow to myself that I would never try and see my brother again. I've stayed true to that, even if it means missing family events that he would be at. Sometimes my parents argue with me about not showing up, But I just tell them that my brother knows why, and you will just have to get it out of him. I don't think they actually have yet, or he probably would have tried to frame me for that thing he did so long ago. It frightens me that he could have done so much more by now, but I'm not really afraid of him anymore. I have a big, strong husband now that I feel can protect me and our 2-year-old. My sick brother is no match for him. Of him anymore. I have a big, strong husband now that I feel can protect me and our 2-year-old. My sick brother is no match for him. Am I the a-hole for telling my boyfriend that I don't want to take care of his son anymore? My boyfriend has a son who's 6. When we started our relationship, he was 2. His mother didn't want me to be involved in the care of their child, and she and I have never really seen eye to eye. In the beginning it went really well and his son was here every other week, but the older he got, the less time he was with his mom, and he's with us 100% now since his mom was arrested a year ago. In the beginning we divided the chores and childcare equally. 4 months ago my boyfriend got an opportunity to work on 3 projects, which could lead him to a big promotion. He's always working late, either from home or in the office. I've been doing all the chores and childcare since then. I cook, clean, get his son ready in the morning, and drop him off at daycare. The only thing my boyfriend has to do is get his son ready for bed. I told him last Friday that from Monday on I won't be doing childcare anymore. He got angry. He said that we're a family and we need to support each other. He told me he needed me right now and that I just need to be patient. I replied saying that this is his son and he needed to do the majority of the childcare. I've been doing all of it, and it's not fair since he is his father. He then went into the other room, got his son, and told his son that mommy says she doesn't want to take care of you anymore while pointing at me. I said to not call me that because I'm not his mother, and his son started crying. I of course comforted and apologized to his son, because it wasn't my intention to upset him. My boyfriend is still mad and has been taking care of his son but won't speak to me. I didn't think this was unreasonable. He is the parent and needs to do more of the child care. And also the mom doesn't even want me to be involved in child care, so I'm already overstepping her wishes. My sister is on his side and says I'm at fault since he and I are a family now, and he needs my support right now, and that the mother's wishes don't matter at all right now. Like, I don't think this was at all unreasonable, but I'm not sure if I was unreasonable here. Let me know. I haven't seen my family in 2 years because they covered up my brother's affair with my wife, and now they want me to come back. That's how much time has passed since I last saw my family. Why? Because they covered up the fact that my own brother was having an affair with my wife, the woman I was committed to for 7 years. The question haunts me. Am I obligated to reconcile, or can I continue to cut ties without guilt? You see, I loved my wife. I loved her with every ounce of my being. I allowed her to live with me rent-free while she pursued her studies, supporting both of us financially at times so she could chase her dreams and passions. We had dreams of a future together, and I thought we were unbreakable. The day I found out about her affair with my brother, everything changed. What made it even more painful was finding out that some of my family members knew about it but didn't tell me. I felt completely heartbroken. I was so angry that I ended up confronting my brother and even knocked him out. After that, I quickly packed my things and left, moving far away from all the lies and betrayal they showed me. The hurt, the anger, and the feeling of being betrayed are still with me. I can't help but hate them for what they did to me. Sometimes my aunt would call me, and she would sound really angry and bossy on the phone. She would say things like, "Family should always be together. You need to make up with your brother. It's what God wants." My mother, who at first seemed like she understood how I felt, started to act the same way as my aunt. She began saying the same things, telling me that I was hurting the family by not being around. Why should I come back when you knew what was going on and didn't say anything to me? I would ask her. She wouldn't answer, just staying silent. And then she would keep asking me to come back. She wouldn't even talk about my question or show that she understood how much I was hurting. I don't just hate my family. I show that she understood how much I was hurting. I don't just hate my family. I'm also shocked by how they don't seem to care or understand how I feel. Some of my friends have left me too because they agree with my family. I just can't understand how everyone, even some people I used to call friends, can tell me that I should just come back and act like nothing happened. They say things like, I need to support my family and family stick together. But those words don't mean anything to me now. Do they even know what they've done to me? It's like they don't know or care about how wrong this all is. I've questioned my own sanity, wondering if I'm missing something. Perhaps I'm the one in the wrong. But deep down, I know that's not true. I used to provide financial support to my family, but that's gone now. I see no reason to support them, and I don't give a damn if they can't pay their bills. This entire ordeal has turned my life upside down, and I find myself lost, confused, and hurt. Am I really obligated to go back to my family through thick and thin, even after such betrayal? I seriously don't see how I'm in the wrong here. But the weight of their expectations weighs heavily on me. I punched my sister's man. So I realize that title sounds crazy, but hear me out. Me and my wife have an 8-year-old daughter who is phenomenal, and I adore her, and she has always enjoyed spending time with my sister, 25. Let's call her Clara. She's engaged to her fiancé, 27, whose name is Howard. So my wife and I were planning a trip to Honduras to see her grandmother, because she is sadly ill, and her wish was to see her granddaughter. And my wife wanted me to come for support. We wanted our daughter to come, but she hates planes and refuses to even step foot in an airport. So I asked my sister if she could come and watch her. She said yes, but Howard wasn't too happy about it. So I told them we'd be gone a week, and I'd pay them when we returned. Unfortunately, my wife's grandmother wasn't doing any better, and her health was getting worse. So the only thing keeping my wife happy was our daughter, who we called every day. The first 2 days she was happy, and was saying how much fun she was having with Clara. But then on the 3rd day she wasn't very talkative, but we just assumed she was just tired. The 4th day, she didn't even answer a FaceTime call, so I called Clara to find out what was going on. She claimed that my daughter was simply exhausted from all the fun they had been having. I didn't really buy it, but I decided to disregard it. Now, on the 5th day, when I called my daughter, we heard yelling, so my wife called her friend Sarah to get our daughter and the police involved. We returned right away after explaining the situation to her family, who were very understanding, and as soon as we returned we went to Sarah's house. Howard was yelling while playing Xbox, and it scared her, so she dropped a plate, but Howard got upset and told her to clean it up and drag her away from the camera. After we landed, we headed straight to Sarah, to which we saw our daughter, and she ran towards us crying and just holding us both. After a while she let go and explained everything, so around the 3rd day, Howard started yelling at her to clean or be quiet, and he wouldn't let her eat dinner because we spoiled her. And Clara was just letting it happen, telling her that she has to understand if she ever wanted a boyfriend. I was horrified because who says that to an 8-year-old? When the cops arrived, they couldn't do much because everything appeared to be in order. But because my daughter wanted to go with Sarah, they allowed Sarah to take her, so I thanked Sarah and we drove home. When we arrived at our house, my daughter immediately went to her room while holding my wife's and my hands and said she wanted to sleep with all of us. I kissed her forehead and said I had to take care of some business and looked sad, but my wife held her and said, "Don't worry, Daddy will be right back." And that's why I love that woman. She always knows what I'm thinking. I drove to Clara's house and knocked on her door. She answered looking surprised, but before she could say anything I forced my way inside and saw Howard drinking a beer, and he looked at me and said, "The frick you want?" I asked him why he treated my daughter that way, and he said that she needed to know how the real world works. When I called him an idiot for even saying that, he got up and walked towards me, thinking I'd be intimidated because he was taller. For context, I'm 5 feet 8 inches, and he's 6'2", but I've always been small my entire life and I never fight fair. So when he tried talking down on me, I punched him in the stomach so hard he actually fell to his knees gasping for air, and after a little while he started throwing up. Before I could do anything else, my sister stepped in between us and began yelling at me to get out. But before I left, I told her she was dead to me, and that would never see my kid again. The next day, I got so many calls and texts from my family saying I could have handled the situation better, and Howard is in the hospital because he apparently can't breathe correctly. So now I'm wondering if I was in the wrong, but my wife and her family say I wasn't at all wrong, but I keep thinking could have handled the situation better. So now I'm thinking I might be the jerk.
My wife cheated on me and I work at the same job as the both of them. We got married at the beginning of the year. This has been a wild month. At the beginning of the month, we were talking about having kids and getting a house together. June 15th, she went out with other coworkers and didn't come back home until 4 a.m. Said she was just talking to the guy about our relationship problems and nothing more, no physical contact. Reluctantly, I wanted to believe her because I've never had a reason not to. She's always been loyal and open to me. She said she would make it up to me and that it wouldn't happen again, but also that it was fun to just be with friends instead of just being at home. She brought up couples counseling and for me to look up a counselor, which I did 2 days later. She goes out again and this time doesn't come home until the next day. I was already livid at this point. She played on my trust before she left, which was the worst mistake I've made. When she came back home, she said she was moving out and that we needed to be separated to have time to think before I made a rash decision so quickly. Out of respect for the workplace, we agreed to try to keep this under the rug at our job. We are usually very close at work and we did everything together, like eating lunch and coming to work together in the same car. Now we keep our distance, and don't even look at each other, so people are catching on. It takes every ounce of my willpower not to tell people why I look gaunt and pale because I'm not eating. People are asking me why I started smoking again. I can't bear to be stronger any longer. I see nothing but rage when I see him at work. I feel nothing but worthlessness when I see her. She's already moving in with the guy. I don't know how much more of this I can tolerate. I want to seek help, but I'm too scared about losing my job and not being able to pay my bills. That is all. I'm so tired of living paycheck to paycheck. For context, I'm a 21F living on my own in California where everything is crazy expensive. I had to give up a lot of things including college when my father abruptly sold our home, moved away and sent me off on my own over a year ago. I have worked since 15 and always considered myself very independent. I currently work 1 full-time job and 1 part-time. I work 6 days a week, usually 7 shifts. I never have time for anything, nor money to even go out to dinner. My rent and car payment take up most of my checks, so gas and other essentials suck up the last of them. I have had $0 in savings since the move and honestly feel like I'm drowning. Most of my friends still live at home, or with a partner splitting the bills. So no one really gets how hard this is on me. My friends always invite me out, but I seriously can't even afford to go out even though I'm 21. You would think working 6 days a week I would have something to show for it, or money to put in my savings or go on little trips, but I am barely paying my bills. I've maxed out my credit card and really don't know what to do. My main job pays decently well and has full benefits, so I really don't want to let it go, and it's also in the field I love. But at the same time, half of me wants to move out of California and somewhere I can actually afford to live. I am a lover of nature and I can never even spend time outdoors. I constantly feel exhausted, and I don't have a support system to fall back on in case things go wrong. I had so many goals when I was younger, and now my biggest stress is simply keeping a roof over my head. I am tired of this. Working to live or living to work? I am tired of this.